All right, let's take a look at taking a photograph into Photoshop and making it into a black and white image. We're also going to look at creating a selection and making the sofa here into its own selection and making it red within a black and white photograph. So those are the two things that we're going to look at doing using our selection methods. So let's take a look at that. Let's open this up in Photoshop. To do that, we're going to right click, go down here to edit in, and edit in Adobe Photoshop. And I've got 2024 here. If you have a newer or older version, that's okay. So click on that version and bring this up, and we're going to open this up in Photoshop. And there's Photoshop, and here is our image. We're going to be working with layers over here. We're going to do this non-destructively. This photograph was taken through a window, so you do see a little bit of the window design, the building behind this that's creating that pattern over the sofa there. We're going to actually work with just making this whole thing a black and white. Now I'm going to show you a couple of other options from there. As we are going to do this non-destructively, we're going to go to image. If we went to image and adjustments and then change this over to a black and white, we would do this destructively because it would actually apply anything that I did here. Let's just say I made some changes here and I hit OK. That applies it directly to the image, to the background copy, and we do not want to do this. We could create a duplicate of the background and do it that way, but why do that when we can actually have more control over our image? So I'm just going to undo this, and what we're going to do next is we're actually going to look at the two adjustment layers that are preferable when changing an image over to black and white. So let's make a new layer through the adjustments panel here. So we're going to go to the adjustments panel, and under adjustments, the first one that I'm going to choose is a little bit further up here. I just need to scroll up a little bit, and I want to choose hue and saturation. I've got hue and saturation. You can also get the hue and saturation down here and also choose it here, and that's going to make my layer right here of hue and saturation. In my properties here, I am going to change the saturation all the way down to 0, and that is going to actually make this into a black and white image. This is one way to create, be non-destructive and to create my image as a black and white photograph. It's not the best way, but it is one of the ways. Typically what I do lose a little bit here is I lose a little bit of my contrast as it brings the saturation down and desaturates those colors. It really kind of messes with my overall contrast of the image. So this isn't my favorite way, but it is a way to actually flip your image over to black and white. I'm going to change this I'm going to turn that off or throw it away, and we're going to actually use a little bit better method, and that's to go to adjustments and to black and white. Now the great thing about this is you can see it's a little bit more contrasty now, so we haven't lost all of that contrast. We could have in hue and saturation added a little bit more contrast back in. That'll be up to you as to how you want to work in Photoshop and which one works best for you for that image that you are working with. As far as the palette itself here for the layers, for this layer, and the adjustments, I do have over here all of these sliders that I can work with. This is similar to what we saw in Lightroom, in that we have a mixer over here that allows us to mix our colors. So the yellows in that floor there, there's a lot of yellows in that floor. If I want to darken that floor down, or if I want to brighten that floor up, I can just by using this slider, and it's going to grab those yellows and it's going to change them to the brightness that I'd like. I'm just going to up this just a slight bit here and get that. I know that this sofa is red back here, so if I grab the red slider, I can darken the sofa up or brighten it up to my taste. So I'm going to leave this somewhat really close to where I originally had it. The blues here, you're going to find that there's not much change in the blues. I'm going to just set this back to 50% here, and that's a typically middle tone there for blues. But I really don't have that many blues in this image. So here's our original, and here's our new black and white image. It still lacks a little bit of contrast, and so I can come in and I can start actually working on my image after I have changed it over. So I could come into brightness contrast, for example, and add some more contrast to the image, change the brightness a little bit if I needed to, or of course I could also do this in curves. So this is one way to actually work with this. Now let's say that I want to make a selection of the sofa itself and change this sofa, or create a black and white around the sofa so that the sofa is still in color, but the outside edge here is in black and white. There are multiple ways to do this. As far as making a selection, I'm going to use the object selection tool here. So I come over here, and if I want to see all three of these, I just click on it and hold, and that's going to show me all three. Then I've got my choice here of which one I want to choose. I'm going to choose the object selection tool. Come over here to, and I'm watching a little circle up here going around. I also want to make sure that sample all layers is checked. It's going to find the hard edges here. And I do have masking options here. I can come and fix the mask if I need to afterwards. So I'm going to select my object. It's going to take just a second. And I'm start to see the marching ants going around the object here. I'm going to zoom in. I hit the space bar and command key on a Mac, or on my PC here, the space bar and control key, and that's going to bring up my zoom tool. I can then zoom in on my image. So I've got my everything selected here, but this leg is missing. So I'm going to choose the polygonal lasso tool up here, and I'm going to come back down here and just choose that leg and make sure that I get a really good selection of it. Once I get all the way around that leg, I'm going to hit OK, or I'm going to hit come to this place where I started, and that will actually then add to this. Now, something I did not mention just now is that I have this on additive up here in the polygonal selection tool, and also a feather of 2. This could actually do some damage to this, so I'm going to come and do a Command Z and undo that selection. I'm going to set this back to 0 so I have a nice sharp edge selection. Maybe a 0.5 might be good for this image for selection purposes, but for right now, let's just put this at 0 for the feather. Here, if I chose to use this on my keyboard, I'm going to need to hit the Command key, the Shift key, sorry, the Shift key on my keyboard, either on Mac or PC. And you can see that the polygon lasso tool will turn to a plus here. Otherwise, the tool itself just looks like this. If I click without doing that anywhere in the image, it's going to lose my selection, and I don't want to lose my selection. So I ended up Command Z in that. But if I want to add to the selection, I either need to hit the Shift key to get that plus, or I can come up here and I can click on the additive button, come down here to my image, and I can then click and click, 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 go around this until I get my images or with that leg selected, and I go back to the original starting point. And when it turns to an O on the, and right now it's got the plus, but when it turns to an O, that means you have found the point which you started at. Once I have this selected, I am going to come over here. I'm going to zoom back out. So without going to the zoom tool here, I just hit the space bar, and again the command key or control key. And instead of zooming to, if I move to the right, that's going to zoom in. I want to move to the left this time and zoom back out. I can use the space bar then to turn it into a hand tool and move this around in my, I can move anywhere around in my image. Once I've got this the way I want it here, and I've got it selected, I am now going to make this into, I need to inverse the selection so that the couch doesn't become black and white. So I'm going to go to select and inverse the selection. Or I could hit Shift Control I is the other option. But since I've already shown this to you and I got this open here, I'm just going to hit inverse, and that's going to cause an inverse of the selection. So now the walls and the floor are the selected areas. Now the reason I did this is it's easier to select the couch because it's the thing that I really don't want to be touched than selecting the large area and then trying to remove this couch from it. So it's easier just to select it and then to inverse that selection once I've made this a proper selection. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to the adjustment options, or here to the adjustments bar, and I'm going to go to black and white. And as you notice, the couch stays red along with its yellow, yellowish color for the yellow-orange color for the legs of the couch. The couch has stayed its color, and so have the legs, and the background has turned black and white. And you can see that here in the mask. The mask is actually now masking out that couch so that the underneath the image, the background image, can be seen through the mask. And that's what's happening here. So we can actually now see the couch through that, and the rest of the image is black and white. Now, I could, if I wanted to, if I wanted this to be a little bit more pale and not so much so bright as it is, I could come down here and again, once again add another black and white image, or another black and white layer here, and then just adjust the amount of opacity to make this sofa just have a little bit of color in here and a little bit more desaturated. I'm down to about 46%. That's desaturated it a little bit, making it not quite pop so much, but to actually feel like it's a little bit more of this image. And that's how I can actually make a selection and create a color object in a black and white area of a photograph. We're also going to look now at creating a black and white image from a color image. And this is a destructive process, so just bear with me here. Before I move on from the black and white layers options, and I forgot to mention this before, is if I click on the black and white here, over here in the properties, I also have one other option that I can do, and that is to choose tint. Tint, the first thing that'll pop up is this kind of yellowish tinge here, and this is a typical sepia tone that a lot of people will add to images. That's why this tint shows up in perspective. You can then come into the tint option by clicking it, and you can change the tint to whatever tint you want it to be. So any of these yellows here, or if I don't like those and I like more of a red, I can pull the slider down, or I can go up here and add blue, or cyan, or magenta, or reds. I can change it to virtually pretty much any color that I want, and then I can change it. I can change the saturation just by clicking into a more saturated area, or lessening the saturation and just adding a tone over the top of the image. Now, I like to tone my images sometimes when I'm using black and white, and this is a great way to just tone an image to give it a color value that is not just straight up black and white. So let's now close that. I'm going to go ahead again and throw this away. And our next step to making this into a black and white image is to actually change its mode. So we're going to go to image mode. And like I said, this is destructive because we're going to be throwing away the color completely. And we're going to change this from an RGB to a grayscale. So I'm going to click grayscale here, and I'm going to hit discard that information. So now it's destructive. I have taken the background, thrown away that information of the background. And if I need to make any contrast changes or anything like that, I'm going to have to do them the old-fashioned way with curves or brightness contrast or something like that to actually add more contrast to this image. So, but this will make your image black and white. This also is going to change the adjustments here. Some things like hue and saturation, color balance, black and white, and all of these are now defunct, and I can't use them or add them in because it is a true black and white image. This means I cannot add this way a tint over the top of this. But, however, if I do want to add a tint or color tone to this, I could change this to another type of image, and that's a duotone. Let's take a look at that by going to Image and Mode and Duotone. Currently it's grayed out. The reason it's grayed out is this image is still a 16-bit file. So the first thing that we have to do is change it to an 8-bit file. So we're going to click 8-bit. Then we'll come back up to Image and go back to Mode and then to Duotone, which is now available, as you can see. Or Index Color is also available. But we're going to go to Duotone. And what this is going to do is this is going to give me some options for my Duotone. So as you can see here, it says monochrome. There are custom up here. I can choose one of these options here, and like a cool gray. So I could add this in. This is going to change this to a cool gray. So it's going to have just a little bit of coolness to the gray, probably a little bit of a blue tone, just a slight bit of a blue tone that it's added into the gray palette here, and that's going to cool the image down a little bit. I could go to a warmer tone. So if I like, I could go with a warm gray. Let's try the warm gray here. So you can see this has a nice brownish tone to it. It's added that to the image here. And I get that nice little brown tone to it. Let's say that for whatever reason, I don't quite like the way that this brown tone is working. I could actually change the color here by going into the color palette and just messing around here until I get the tone that I want and the value that I want. So maybe I like this value better. I can come back in here and hit OK. I could also then come up here and save this as a preset if I wanted to, and then I could load these presets later. I could also change the curve of this as to how much it is adding. Right now it's adding a little bit, so if I pull this down, I am going to actually decrease the amount of color and change to the values in this area right here. So I could pull down and it's just going to get brighter and it's going to get less of that color. Or I can pull up here and you can see it's darkening those values there. So this is a way to actually work on the image as you're working with it. I may need to pull all of this over so I can see the sofa itself. So I'm going to hit OK here, move this out of the way, and now I can see the sofa and how it's affecting the sofa as I make this change. So you can see the changes here and how it's going to adjust. I can put in as many points as I want and see how it's going to actually affect the image. Now this is one way to actually add in your duotone to this. You can also do things like tritones and quadtones. A tritone is basically, I can use basically I'm changing this to black and white. And then down here with this triotone, I could add in another color. And I could tell this where I want this tone to actually end up. So I could put these down basically in the shadows. And I can come back up here to this color and change this to the highlights. So it's going to tone the image in the highlights with this color, and with the reds it's going to tone the dark areas. Or if I'd like, let's see something a little bit different here. Let's go to blue, and we can actually probably see this a little bit better. You can actually see how it's working in the shadows here and creating this duotone, or this tritone. So, and if we hit color, this is going to give us an idea of how this image is going to look once it's done. Once I hit OK, all inks need to be named, so let's just call this blue. Blue. There we go. If I can type, and then we'll hit OK. And that's going to create my tritone image here. And you can see that it's a tritone image up here. If I was going to print this, I definitely need to take this back to the mode and to an RGB. And this is now switched it back over to an an RGB profile. And if I need to set that profile, I may end up coming over here. And I'm on a PC at the moment. So I would come in here to my preferences, which is located under edit, and I would come down here to assign a profile and make sure that my profile is like an Adobe profile. So I'm going to choose the Adobe profile here and hit OK. That's going to assign this a profile of Adobe. You did see a slight bit of color change as it did that because the Adobe profile is going to have a little bit bigger color space as we've discussed in class. So there's my duotone, or my tritone image, and as it's completed, and then I would make other changes to it, go in, work on it here in Photoshop, get rid of these scratches on the floor, maybe go back, take it back into Camera Raw, filter, and adjust and get rid of the noise that I was talking about before. There's all kinds of things that you can do to make your image better, and that's what I'm looking for from you as you complete your images. But this is how you can create an image in black and white.